resemblance with us, no, it's a totally different game as well. Definitely not in the comparison.
That was LeBron James discussing how today's Cleveland Cavaliers stack up against the version of the team from his earlier years there. He wasn't wrong, and honestly, most fans already sensed as much. But as the interview went on, he said something that caught Cavs fans off guard, something that had a portion of the fan base calling for his head. Let's start with the setting, because the setting is the story here. This was the night the Lakers rolled into Cleveland, and by the final buzzer, the Cavaliers had absolutely dismantled them, winning 129-99. LeBron himself had one of his quietest performances of the season, scoring just 11 points on 3 of 10 shooting. But the final score wasn't really the headline. Before the game even got going, the arena played a tribute video honoring LeBron's Cleveland legacy. His explosive 2007 playoff run against Detroit, where he scored 25 straight points as a 22-year-old, and his march to his very first NBA Finals. That night, the Cavaliers even wore throwback jerseys, matching the style he wore during that iconic Pistons series nearly 2 decades earlier. Calling the game from the broadcast table was Richard Jefferson, LeBron's former teammate from their 2016 championship run, now working as an analyst, while LeBron is still out there playing. The tribute clearly got to him. Cameras caught LeBron visibly emotional, and that moment set the tone for everything he said at the podium afterward. He addressed the Richard Jefferson moment head-on, admitting it was strange to process, watching a guy he won a championship with a decade ago now sitting behind a desk analyzing him. As he put it, it felt surreal watching a former championship teammate cover him from the booth. Naturally, the first thing reporters wanted to know was whether this could be his final game ever in Cleveland. LeBron is currently in his 23rd NBA season. He's 41 years old, and he has no contract secured for next year. He didn't say yes, he didn't say no. Instead, he gave the same kind of measured, reflective answer he'd repeat throughout the night. Something about trying to soak in every moment, because he knows nothing is guaranteed at this stage of his career. From there, the conversation moved to his son, Bronny, who received a "We Want Bronny" chant from the crowd, threw down a fast break dunk, and finished the night with 8 points in 8 minutes. It moved to his mother, Gloria, who watched from a suite as both her son and her grandson played in the same league on the same night, a moment LeBron admitted he still couldn't fully wrap his head around, one he capped off by handing her his game-worn jersey afterward. It moved to the 10-year anniversary of that 2016 championship run, and the group chat he still keeps with Kevin Love, Tristan Thompson, Channing Frye, and Richard Jefferson, a crew he says is already planning a reunion once this season wraps up. And then, near the end of the session, a reporter asked the question that the entire internet clip is now built around. The reporter pointed out that LeBron has watched this current Cleveland roster develop from a distance, twice a season, every year. Then came the real question. What has he actually seen from this group, and does he see any resemblance between what they're building now and what he built during his own 11 years in Cleveland? That's the pivot moment. That's the question everyone had been waiting for, aimed directly at the one person whose Cleveland legacy every version of this franchise inevitably gets compared to. Whatever LeBron said next was guaranteed to become a headline. The only real question was which one. But before we get to his actual answer, we need to be clear about what everyone thought about this Cleveland team really means, because you can't judge whether LeBron confirmed a narrative until you understand the narrative itself. Here's the reputation this Cleveland core has been carrying, and it didn't come out of nowhere. Rewind to the previous season. The 2024-25 Cavaliers, on paper, were an absolute powerhouse. They finished 64-18, claimed the #1 seed in the Eastern Conference, and put together winning streaks of 16, 15, and 12 games. Donovan Mitchell earned an All-NBA selection. Evan Mobley was named Defensive Player of the Year, and Kenny Atkinson took home Coach of the Year. And their offense finished as the most efficient in the entire league. Every signal pointed to this being the year this young core finally broke through. Then the playoffs happened. Cleveland swept Miami in the first round and looked nearly unbeatable doing it. Then the Indiana Pacers arrived and dismantled them. Indiana eliminated the top-seeded Cavaliers 4-1 in the second round, effectively running them off their own home court, winning games in Cleveland that the Cavs were expected to control. A team that shot the ball brilliantly all season suddenly went cold, shooting under 30% from three-point range across the series. Think about how jarring that was. This was a team that lost all 3 of its home games in that series and blew multiple double-digit leads. The defense that had carried them through the regular season fell apart completely, with Indiana scoring at least 120 points in 3 of the 5 games. A team that looked untouchable in April simply couldn't function once a hungrier, more physical opponent turned up the pressure. And that's where the label attached itself for good. Of every team in NBA history to win at least 64 games in a season, Cleveland became only the 4th to fail to even reach a conference finals. 4th, ever. That's not a minor footnote. That's a lasting mark. Donovan Mitchell summed up how he felt in one word: embarrassed. Then he walked back out onto the court just to face the fans directly, telling them the entire basketball world was about to write them off. And that's exactly when the narrative locked into place across the league. The blunt question that summer became,
I don't really like to comment on, I'm not a part of that locker room.
Mitchell and Garland backcourt too undersized to win in the postseason? Can Mobley and Jared Allen really coexist during winning time minutes? Does a system built to win 82 regular season games fall apart the moment a disciplined playoff opponent slows the pace and muddies things up? Every soft spot fans had politely overlooked during that 64-win parade got dragged back into the light, and this time nobody was in the mood to let it slide. To be fair, there was a reasonable counter-argument. Cleveland entered that Indiana series banged up. Garland, Mobley, and Hunter were all dealing with injuries, and writing off a 64-win team over an injury-riddled postseason run would have been an overreaction. But nuance rarely survives contact with the internet. What stuck wasn't the fair version, it was the headline version, the meme version, the one built for a thumbnail. So when we say what everyone thought about the Cavaliers, that's exactly what we mean. Not that they're bad, but that they're a dazzling regular season machine that shrinks in May. A team that racks up wins, banners, and awards only to hand it all back the moment the stakes get real. A genuinely good team that might not be built for a deep playoff run. That's the reputation LeBron was handed at that podium. Now, watch what he actually did with it. The first thing worth understanding about LeBron's answer is that he didn't attack the narrative head-on. Before offering a single opinion, he stepped back from the premise entirely, saying it was a genuinely tough question for him to answer. He didn't stop there. He explained exactly why he felt uncomfortable answering it, and that reasoning matters because it undercuts the idea that he was handing down some sweeping verdict. His point was simple. He's not inside that locker room anymore. No film sessions, no bus rides, no day-to-day access. So in his view, it wasn't really his place to grade the team. When he did finally engage, the first thing he reached for wasn't criticism, it was a defense. He immediately brought up the team's injuries, naming the players who were sidelined and framing this Cavaliers roster as one that hadn't yet shown its full potential. He specifically pointed to Evan Mobley and Darius Garland being out, noting the team obviously still needed to get healthy. Only after that groundwork did he get to the line that would define the entire clip, and it's worth pausing on exactly how the question was framed. The reporter didn't simply ask whether this Cavs team was good, he asked whether LeBron saw any resemblance between what this current roster is building and what LeBron himself accomplished across 11 years in Cleveland, a championship, 4 straight finals appearances, an entire legacy. That's a loaded question. It quietly forces LeBron to either anoint this team as his successors or declare them lacking. There's no truly neutral way to answer a question built like that. To his credit, LeBron seemed to recognize the trap. He answered the literal question honestly. Asked if this team resembles what he built, he said no, explaining that it's simply a completely different era of basketball. Notice the specific word he chose, era, not worse team. Not frauds. He reached for the idea that the game he played in Cleveland and the game being played today aren't really the same sport to compare directly, which makes the comparison itself shaky from the start. To back that up, he pointed to his own resume. The run from 2014 through 2018, the string of finals appearances, what that group accomplished across those years. And notably, even while making the case for his own teams, he wasn't tearing the current Cavaliers down to do it. He kept sprinkling in respect for this group throughout, describing his old teams as good, great, or simply decent depending on the year, and reminding everyone that his 2018 squad was written off before shocking everyone by reaching the finals anyway. In other words, he was grading using a scale that includes his own underdog runs, not holding this current Cavs core to some impossible flawless standard. Then came the two lines that ended up screenshotted across the internet. He said plainly that this current Cavaliers group doesn't belong in the same conversation as his prime, definitely not on the same level as his own career. He closed by saying even attempting that comparison would be unfair, not just to himself, but to the current Cavaliers too, calling it a disservice to everyone involved. So that's the raw material. On the surface, LeBron looked a Cleveland reporter in the eye and said this Cavs team doesn't compare to his own teams. That's the sentence that made the clip go viral. But whether that sentence actually means what the headline claims it means is an entirely different question, and the answer lies in why he framed it that way. This is where the story becomes more interesting than the screenshot suggests, because everything about that answer was shaped by the fact that LeBron was in an unusually reflective headspace that night. He told the room more than once that the reason he was so present, so emotional, so introspective is that he genuinely doesn't know how much time he has left in his career. He's 41, closing in on a finish line he admits he still can't clearly see. He even acknowledged that 8 years ago, walking out of Cleveland for Los Angeles, the idea that he'd still be playing in 2026 would have sounded absurd to him. When reporters pressed him on why he keeps grinding through his 23rd season at this age, he described it as a personal battle against time itself, one he says he's taking personally and intends to keep fighting for as long as he can. That context matters. A man weighing the end of his own career is naturally going to talk about that career in monumental terms. When LeBron brought up the 2016 championship and those consecutive finals runs, he wasn't measuring the current Cavaliers against some arbitrary bar. He was measuring them against the single greatest stretch of his basketball life, a bar almost no team in NBA history could clear. Held up against a finals-every-year dynasty, of course there's no resemblance. That says far more about how extraordinary his own peak was than it does about any shortcoming in Cleveland's current roster. Then layer the injuries back into the picture. The very first substantive thing he said was that the Cavaliers were shorthanded, Mobley out, Garland out. He wasn't evaluating them at full strength. In a way, he was quietly attaching an asterisk to the whole conversation on their behalf, the same asterisk Cleveland fans had been begging people to remember after the Indiana series, when Garland, Mobley, and Hunter were all banged up. And consider the timing of this exact moment in the season. This wasn't even destined to remain the same roster for long. Just a week after this game, Cleveland traded Darius Garland to the Clippers in a deal for James Harden, completely reshaping their backcourt, a move aimed directly at fixing the spacing and shot creation issues Indiana had exposed, pairing a full-time playmaker alongside Mitchell and Allen, and opening the floor for Mobley and Allen. The team LeBron was being asked to evaluate in late January was mid-transformation, injured and nowhere near its final form. He seemed to sense that, which is likely part of why he kept insisting he wasn't the right person to hand out grades in the first place. There's also the simple matter of why LeBron himself was still out there playing at all. When reporters asked what keeps him going, he didn't bring up championships or records. He talked about still loving the process of playing the game at a high level, and about wanting to pour whatever he has left back into the sport and into the players coming up behind him, because, as he put it, he'll spend more years of his life without basketball than with it. That's not the mindset of someone looking to settle old scores or take a parting shot at a rival franchise. It's the mindset of someone savoring the final stretch of a long journey, choosing his words carefully along the way. And then there's who LeBron actually is in this story. He grew up just 35 minutes from that arena. He delivered this city its only championship in franchise history. When he talks about the Cavaliers, he's not some neutral outside analyst. He's the franchise's most famous alumnus, standing in the very building where his jersey will one day hang, being asked to grade the current occupants of his old house. A man in that position doesn't casually torch the team on his way out, and he didn't. He praised the crowd, he praised the memories, he wrapped nearly every difficult sentence in the acknowledgement that this wasn't really his place to judge. Hanging over the entire night was a subplot that made everything feel heavier. LeBron is set to become an unrestricted free agent after this season, meaning a return to Cleveland isn't pure fantasy. The emotion during that pre-game tribute had plenty of fans openly hoping to bring him back for a final chapter. Whether or not that ever happens, consider the position it puts him in. You don't publicly trash a roster you might theoretically join. You don't slam the door on a city that just gave you a standing ovation and might end up offering you your final contract. Every incentive that night pointed towards grace, not criticism, which is one more reason to be skeptical of a headline that takes a careful, hedged non-answer and squeezes out a verdict that LeBron never actually gave. So, the only question that actually matters is this: does LeBron confirm what everyone already believed about the Cavaliers, or does the headline take a gracious, hedged non-answer and squeeze out a verdict that LeBron never actually gave? So, did he confirm it? Here's where we land, laid out plainly. Let's start with the kernel of truth, because it's only fair, both to LeBron and to the headline. He did clearly say this Cavs team doesn't compare to his own teams. Asked directly about resemblance, he said no. Asked about the level of comparison, he said it's definitely not on the same level as his career. Those words came out of his mouth, on the record in Cleveland. If your entire understanding of what everyone thought about the Cavaliers is simply that this team isn't on the level of a prime LeBron squad, well, almost no team is, and yes, technically the headline has a leg to stand on. But that was never really the sharper, more cutting version of the narrative that actually stuck to this franchise. The real accusation was harsher, that they're frauds, regular season darlings who fold when it matters, a flawed core that can't escape the second round. And on that front, the version that actually stings, LeBron confirmed